You stayed quiet when you should have spoken up. You kept your thoughts to yourself when clarity was needed most. And now, that silence has created exactly the opposite of what you hoped for. Maybe you thought staying out of it would keep the peace. Maybe you believed that not rocking the boat would somehow make things better on their own. But here you are, watching relationships crumble, opportunities slip away, and misunderstandings grow into walls you can't seem to climb over. Your silence backfired, and you're not alone in this. Think about it. How many times have you swallowed your words, thinking it was the mature thing to do? How many moments have you let pass by, telling yourself that speaking up would only make things worse? You convinced yourself that silence was wisdom, that holding back was strength, but now you're seeing the truth that so many of us learn the hard way. Sometimes silence isn't golden. Sometimes it's destructive. Here's what happens when we choose silence over truth. We think we're protecting others from discomfort, but we're actually robbing them of the chance to understand us completely. We believe we're avoiding conflict, but we're creating a different kind of tension, one that builds up like pressure in a sealed container until something has to give. Your silence wasn't really about keeping peace. It was about avoiding the vulnerability that comes with being fully seen and potentially misunderstood. It was about protecting yourself from the risk of rejection, disagreement, or having to defend your position. And that's human. That's completely understandable. But it's also exactly why your silence backfired. When you don't speak your truth, other people fill in the blanks with their own assumptions. They create stories about what you're thinking, what you want, what you believe. And those stories are rarely accurate. They're usually worse than whatever reality you were trying to protect them from. That promotion you didn't ask for, someone else did. That relationship conversation you kept putting off. The other person interpreted your silence as indifference or rejection. That boundary you never set. People kept crossing it because they didn't even know it existed. Your silence created a vacuum, and vacuums don't stay empty. They get filled with other people's interpretations, assumptions, and sometimes their own fears and insecurities projected onto you. But here's what I want you to understand before we go any further. You're not broken for choosing silence. You're not weak or cowardly or fundamentally flawed. Most of us learn to be quiet as a survival mechanism. Maybe you grew up in a household where speaking up led to conflict or dismissal. Maybe you learned early that your voice didn't matter or that peace was more valuable than truth. Perhaps you've been burned before. You spoke up once, maybe many times, and it went badly. Someone twisted your words, used them against you, or made you feel foolish for even trying. So you learned to keep things to yourself. You developed a pattern of internal dialogue over external communication. The problem is that survival mechanism that once protected you is now limiting you. The silence that once kept you safe is now keeping you stuck. So what do you do now? How do you move forward when your silence has already created damage? How do you rebuild trust, repair relationships, and reclaim your voice when you're starting from a place where people have already drawn their own conclusions about who you are and what you want? First, you need to acknowledge what happened without making excuses. This doesn't mean beating yourself up or taking responsibility for everyone else's reactions. It means owning your part in the miscommunication. Yes, miscommunication. Because silence, when communication was needed, is still a form of communication. It sends a message, just not the one you intended. You might need to have some uncomfortable conversations. You might need to reach out to people and say something like, "I realize my silence may have been confusing or hurtful. That wasn't my intention, and I'd like to share what was actually going on for me if you're open to hearing it." Notice that this isn't an apology for having feelings or needs. It's not an apology for being human. It's taking responsibility for the communication breakdown while opening the door for real understanding. Some people will be receptive to this. Others might not be ready, and that's their choice to make. You can't control how others respond, but you can control how honestly and authentically you show up moving forward. Second, you need to examine the beliefs that led to your silence in the first place. What were you telling yourself about speaking up? That it was selfish? That it would hurt others? That it wasn't worth the potential conflict? These beliefs might have served you once, but they're not serving you now. You need to challenge them. Ask yourself, is it really more loving to let someone operate on false assumptions about you than to give them the truth? Is it really more peaceful to let resentment build than to address issues early? The truth is, authentic communication is one of the greatest gifts you can give to your relationships. When you speak honestly about your thoughts, feelings, and needs, you give others the chance to truly know you. You give them the opportunity to respond to who you actually are, not who they think you are. Third, you need to start practicing speaking up in smaller, safer situations. Don't wait for the next big crisis to test your newfound voice. Start with low-stakes situations. Express a preference about where to eat dinner, share an opinion about a movie, state a boundary about your time or energy. Each time you speak up, you're building evidence for yourself that your voice matters, that people can handle your truth, and that the world doesn't end when you advocate for yourself. This isn't about becoming confrontational or aggressive. It's about becoming authentic. There's a huge difference between speaking your truth with compassion and speaking your truth with attack. You can be honest without being harsh. You can be direct without being dismissive of others' feelings. Fourth, accept that not everyone will appreciate your newfound voice. Some people benefit from your silence. They like being able to assume what you want, to make decisions without your input, to avoid the complexity that comes with truly knowing another person. When you start speaking up, you might face pushback. People might say you've changed, that you're being difficult, that you used to be so easygoing. This is actually a good sign. It means you're breaking out of patterns that weren't serving you, even if they were convenient for others. Remember, being easygoing isn't the same as being easy to walk over. Being accommodating isn't the same as being invisible. You can be kind and considerate while still having a voice. Fifth, practice self-compassion throughout this process. Changing communication patterns takes time. You might find yourself sliding back into silence sometimes, especially when emotions are high or the stakes feel significant. That's normal. That's part of the process. Don't use occasional setbacks as evidence that you can't change or that you're destined to repeat the same patterns forever. Every time you notice yourself choosing silence when communication would be better, you're becoming more aware. Awareness is the first step toward different choices. You might also need to grieve some of the opportunities and relationships that were impacted by your previous silence. There might be things you can repair, and there might be things you can't. Both are part of this journey. Here's what I want you to remember as you move forward. Your voice matters. Your thoughts, feelings, and perspectives have value. The world needs what you have to offer, but only if you're willing to offer it. Your silence didn't backfire because you're bad at relationships or communication. It backfired because you were trying to manage other people's emotions and reactions instead of focusing on authentic connection. You were trying to control outcomes instead of trusting the process of honest communication. Moving forward, your job isn't to make sure everyone likes what you have to say. Your job is to say it with kindness, honesty, and respect for both yourself and others. Your job is to show up as who you really are and let people respond to that truth. Some of the best relationships you'll ever have will be with people who appreciate your voice, who want to know what you really think, who value your input even when it's different from their own perspective. But those people can't find you if you stay hidden behind your silence. The silence that backfired was actually teaching you something important. It was showing you the cost of not advocating for yourself, not sharing your truth, not trusting others to handle your authenticity. Now you know. Now you can choose differently. Your voice is ready when you are,